We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on how Guusto uses Guusto. Pretty stoked to be here today and sit down with my favorite person in the world, Julia Fulton.
Wow.
Oh, that was a big laugh. She is super essential for us here over at Guusto and makes my life and I think everyone's lives here at the company just a little bit better. So super excited to talk about how we use recognition at Guusto and how we use Guusto. As you're joining us, as you're jumping in, don't forget to turn live captioning on. If you're joining us from LinkedIn, I do believe it's turned on automatically. But if you're joining us on YouTube, you do have to turn that captions button on. So if you want to do that, you just go to the little gear icon on your screen, click it on, turn on live captioning, and that should get you going for those closed captioning. And we also love questions. So if you have any questions about recognition programs, if you're in a certain industry, certain size of organization, getting managers to use it, all that kind of good stuff, we are here to help. We're here to answer those questions. We're here to do all that kind of good stuff as we're talking about just how we do it in our own organization. And we realize that our organization is not going to be like your organization, but we do work with organizations of all shapes and sizes across different industries. So we have seen what good recognition programs look like kind of across the whole spectrum. So hopefully we can help answer your questions if you have them. And before we kind of start doing introductions and jumping into things, I'd love to hear where people are coming from. So, drop in a comment of, where you're tuning in from, what you hope to learn about this, and maybe what the weather's like. I'm here from Victoria, BC, Canada. It is lovely and the weather's kind of perfect. We're sitting at like the low 20 degrees Celsius. It's sunny. It's been a little bit dry, I will say. I'd love a little bit of rain, more rain happening, but outside of that, it's pretty perfect. Yeah. And then, you all know me if you joined these webinars before. My name is Noah Warder, head of people over here at Guusto. I do all things people and culture and kind of love what I do and love building people first programs and cultures. And I'm going to let Julia introduce herself as well.
Hey, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm also on the people team here with Guusto. Work very closely with Noah. Very lucky to work closely with Noah. We have a lot of fun most of the time managing things here at Guusto. And yeah, I take care of sort of recruitment, candidate experience, onboarding, and then just sort of all things, all other things, people and culture that fall on my desk. And weather check here in Toronto, blue skies, really nice. And I'm going to the Blue Jays game tonight. So I think the roof is going to be open, which is very exciting. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I see a couple of other Ontario folks and some people from the States as well. So welcome everyone. Excited to have you here.
Yeah, excited to have you here. Nick from Asheville, North Carolina, actually lived in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for a year. So I'm sure it's really hot and humid down where you're at right now. So I don't envy that right now. But let's jump into things and talk about recognition. And before we really jump into, the nuts and bolts of, how we use Guusto and how we promote recognition, all that kind of stuff, I want to set the stage a little bit. And Julie and I are going to talk a little bit about why recognition is important, because I think, we're all HR professionals here or people leaders or whatnot, but let's just kind of talk about why recognition is important and sort of some of the talking points you might be able to use with some of your executives or leaders in your organization if you're trying to get a program across the line or increase your budget or do whatever you want to do. So, Julia, from your perspective, why do you think recognition is so important for organizations?
Well, I think recognition goes a long way, and we'll get into this over the course of these 30 minutes, but a long way in like really promoting the behaviors that you want to see in your people. But something kind of funny and something that people might not know about us here at Guusto is we didn't always use recognition internally, which seems a little bit silly when you say it out loud, that we are a recognition company selling recognition to clients and trying to help other people build great workplace culture through recognition. We didn't use our own tool until one fateful day in like maybe 2018. before my time, but when a 1-star Glassdoor review was left by an ex-employee, sort of sharing that like, this place sucks. Like, I don't feel recognized. I don't feel like we kind of practice what we preach. And that really kind of sparked our co-founders to use recognition internally. And just like anecdotally, the change that was seen at the organization from then on was really night and day in terms of like, both employee engagement and employee retention, but also like revenue and company success and our headcount and all that kind of stuff. So it can really drive the behaviors you want to see in your organization, like retention, engagement, productivity, all that kind of stuff. What would you add there, Noah?
Yeah, I mean, you really hit it on the head, and I think Joe and Skate talked a lot about that moment of aha that they had of like, oh, okay, we should be doing practice what we preach. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the model that we've kind of come up with at Guusto and how we think of recognition and culture kind of in a larger way. And so we've spent a lot of time developing this model. We call it the ACER culture model. And there's a whole presentation. Like we have a whole sort of presentation that we go through that's about an hour long, where we talk about all these different pieces. So I'm just going to give you the very top level, high level piece here. But these are kind of the core elements of culture that we look at. And so you got your culture right in the middle with that big C, and then you got your three kind of pieces of culture: your purpose and your opportunity and well-being. And this is all around your employees. Do they have purpose? Do they have opportunity to grow? Are they being taken care of? And so how do we do that? How do we sort of connect all of those pieces? Well, you got to align people around their core values of the organization, their objectives of the organization, but also the objectives of the people themselves, and then also making sure that there's impact from the organization. So looking at this from like a DE&I perspective, social equity, that type of things. And then looking at, the purpose as well of like empowering folks. So how are you coaching them? How are you empowering managers to recognize and reward people? How are you promoting their own growth and all of those things that can help them succeed in their careers? And then connecting people. And so connecting their well-being and their opportunities through team building, peer-to-peer recognition, public recognition, and private recognition. So we really look at recognition as a really great tool, not the only one. There's lots of different ways that you can do these things, but we see recognition as a very powerful tool to build upon your culture by, you can really drive people's purpose and their opportunity and their well-being by aligning them with your core values and your objectives and your DEI initiatives through recognition and rewards. You can really help with coaching by, promoting those moments and recognizing those moments where people and managers and leaders are coaching their people and helping them succeed, by empowering managers to have budgets to reward their members of their team, or the people at their store, or the people in their district that are performing really, really well, and rewarding and recognizing people who are growing, who are using their L&D, who are bringing new knowledge to the organization. And then again, using recognition to connect people. So team building. So, find those cultural champions in your organization. We all have them. There's those people who just, they want to bring their teams together. They want to have those programs and those initiatives, and then doing it outside of work or during work, and really recognize those people for who they are. They are those cultural champions, those team builders. And it's, they're going above and beyond their role, the job description that you hired them for, to create that sort of collaboration and camaraderie and boost those connections within their team. And then, really empowering people to give peer-to-peer recognition, really focusing on public recognition and why that's so important. But, I always like to add the caveat to this piece is there are some people who really don't like public recognition. It causes way more damage than you actually think. They don't want to be called out in front of people. They don't like that. They don't like the spotlight. And so, also learning about what people want and what they need. And there are some people who just want to be recognized privately. They don't want the spotlight. And so knowing who those people are as well. So this is kind of how we think of recognition and culture and why we think it's so important and why we do it internally. And the way we kind of look at this is like, if you're not doing all of these things, you're not going to have the collaboration you need on your teams to really solve the problems your organization is coming across. You're not going to have trust between employees and managers and leadership, which causes, breakdowns in communication. People try and hide mistakes and problems, and then you don't find out about them until, they're huge and really hard to solve. And then you find a lack of leadership. And I'm not talking leadership in like you won't have executives, but leadership in the sense of people owning and really driving results, whether they're a customer support representative or your vice president of sales. So I'm talking about that kind of leadership of like, it can happen at all levels of the organization. And so when you recognize and support people who take those initiatives, you will see more leadership being taken across the organization. So this is our why. This is why we think recognition is so important, because we see it as this tool to influence all of these areas of culture and how they can really impact the business and drive business growth and business objectives. So there's our why. This is what we think is so important around recognition. And to Julia's points, there's so many things that it impacts. And to be fair, some of those things are really hard to pinpoint from a metric standpoint. Like you're not gonna be like, implement a recognition program and the next week you'll be like, oh, our retention rates have gone up 9 points. It is very much a long-term, long gain type of program. But if you follow the metrics and you follow the data and you follow the reports and studies out there, all signs point to having, a robust recognition program really driving engagement, retention, collaboration, trust. And there's this really interesting stat that came out of Gallup that employees need to hear 7 pieces of positive feedback or recognition or praise for them to properly internalize any critical feedback that they're getting. And so that's another thing that I think is really interesting that a lot of people don't take into account of, like, even when you're delivering critical feedback in the most inclusive and proper way, even if that's all people are hearing, they're just going to start feeling really bad about themselves and their performance is going to go down. So you still have to provide that positive recognition, that positive reinforcement that a recognition program is really great for those critical pieces, so people can grow to have the most impact that they can have. All right.
Yeah. And I'll just hop in with, like, we obviously just dove in the deep end with like a detailed explanation of our why, and we do this, right? Like this is what our business does. But there's also a lot of clients who are starting out of like, we don't have a lot of budget for this, or like we have zero recognition. Like, how do we start? And what we just showed you, it is a lot. And so there's a lot of our clients that kind of take the crawl, walk, run approach with Guusto, which is you sort of start out with like, and we'll talk about these types of programs. But you start out with maybe a milestone program, and then you sprinkle in some manager budget recognition, and then maybe you pop into like a full peer-to-peer recognition program like we have here. But very much like, there's a lot there.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. And I think that's why a lot of recognition programs actually fail, is that companies try and do it all at once. And so, like, as you mentioned, Julia, the crawl, walk, run model of like, maybe you're updating your milestones program. Maybe before it was like every 5 years, someone would get a pin or a mug or something of like, let's modernize that. Let's make it annual. Let's put in some substantial rewards. Let's make sure people are really actually feeling appreciated for their time at the organization. And then, empowering managers and leaders and district supervisors to recognize and reward people. And then, the golden goblet of recognition is that peer-to-peer program, but you need to get people used to what recognition looks like before they can feel comfortable actually giving it to each other. And so I think, you really nailed it there. And so let's talk a little bit about how we do recognition, because I think that's kind of the meat of this webinar and this conversation of how do we do this. And so I'm going to pass things over to Julia a little bit here and let her kind of showcase how we do recognition at Guusto and how we've seen it successful in other organizations. And Amy, yes, I will find that resource and make sure that it goes out with the post-webinar email.
Awesome. So how do we do recognition at Guusto? So we just threw out a couple of phrases or words in the recognition industry that maybe you know, maybe you don't. So we'll start out with what we do kind of on an annual basis. And so that would be our milestone program. So we have a milestone program at Guusto that rewards employees for sticking around for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, so on and so forth. And that goes out annually. A little bit more robust, maybe like the crawl walk, the walk of the crawl walk run would be our monetary sort of manager recognition program. And so this is the idea that everyone at Guusto has a monthly budget that they can use to send one another recognition. And then lastly, our most kind of robust part of our program is our peer-to-peer. And so I kind of mentioned this, our peer-to-peer and kind of like the non-monetary side of things. And so at Guusto, you have the opportunity, like I mentioned, with your budget to send monetary recognition, but you also have the opportunity to send non-monetary recognition. And we actually polled our team recently to ask, like, when would you give someone, a $25 gift card versus a non-monetary, shout out? And the results were really interesting. Some of it was just genuinely like, well, if I have budget left in my month, I'll send monetary. And if I don't, I'll send non-monetary. But for other people and for other situations, it was a little bit more niche where like if, somebody was accomplishing something and did like a really, really great job and nailed something that's like in line with maybe what's expected in their role, that could be a non-monetary shout out, as we would call it. But if someone really kind of went, as they say, above and beyond, maybe took on something that was like outside of their main skill set, maybe accomplished like a longer term project or goal, they'd be rewarded with monetary recognition, like a gift card through Guusto is what we would do. And so that's our program. Like I said, it kind of has most elements of, a well-rounded recognition program with peer-to-peer, top-down, so manager to direct report, and options for monetary and non-monetary. But as Noah kind of mentioned at the start, that's not necessarily what we see with a lot of our clients. A lot of folks are coming, having nothing in place, and so they're maybe starting just with updating their monetary recognition program. A lot of our clients are in the retail or frontline space, and what they find, the best sort of bang for their buck in terms of budget and utilization is a manager kind of top-down recognition program. And so, a store manager or a district manager at a retail location, having a set amount of budget each month to recognize employees who are kind of, going above and beyond, showcasing core values, getting through their onboarding program, things like that. We see a lot of clients take on. And then down the road, once recognition kind of becomes very much ingrained in their culture, then it makes sense maybe to introduce a peer-to-peer program where folks can be recognizing one another. Sometimes that's going to be monetary, sometimes it's not. But it's important, and we find a lot of our clients, we advise them to like nail the culture of recognition before you implement every bell and whistle that you possibly could. Anything to add there, Noah?
No, I think the one thing I will highlight is that at Guusto, everyone in the organization gets a bit of budget, regardless of whether they're a manager or not. And this is very unique to our culture and our organization. No one else does this, really. And maybe like other recognition programs that are more points focused because it's easier to spread those points around. But for us and for how we do it, everyone gets a set amount of dollars, the actual dollars to give to their peers and to anyone in the organization as managers. We get it to give to our team members and to our peers and to other members of other teams who help us out. So I think that's something that is unique to us. What we see most successful with a lot of our clients, especially those in the frontline industries, is that sort of manager top-down recognition, at least to start. And like as Julie was saying, to build that culture of recognition, to show what that looks like, why it's successful, how does you do it. And manager empowerment and manager training is so important in this regard, and making sure managers understand the importance of recognition, how to do it well. And we have lots of resources to help make that happen. But I think that's the biggest thing here is like, if you want your recognition program to succeed, you have to get your managers and your executives on board, doing it, being involved, talking about it, and doing all those things. And so let's kind of, I think that's a good segue into talking a bit more about like how we do this. So like the reminders and the things that we do, I'm not going to steal your thunder, Julia. I'm going to pass it back over to you and have you talk about those things.
It was a really good segue though. So to get into like, when we do recognition and like how we make sure we build it into our culture. We do this in a couple ways. So I'm just going to kind of rattle through them and then try to summarize at the end. So the big thing we try to implement at Guusto is like forcing functions. And that's a great kind of corporate lingo kind of word that people throw around a lot. But I think it's kind of the bread and butter of like why we actually do have a true culture of recognition is we weave it into a lot of things that we already do on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis. So we'll start with kind of the big one at Guusto, which are our all team meetings. So every 2 weeks we get together, the entire team, and go through kind of like project updates, all that kind of stuff. We do some breakout rooms and socialize at the start. But something really important that we do, we always do at the end of our all team meetings is recognition. And we carve out about 20 minutes or so for this, just so you have context for like how much we're actually putting into this. And what we'll do is we'll kind of go through a couple of different things. The first is the leaderboard. So we'll take a look. I'll actually share my screen here and show you sort of what that would look like. But we'll go through the leaderboard for the previous month to sort of demonstrate who gave and received the most recognition. So I'll kind of show you what that looks like in our platform here. Over here on the right is our leaderboard. So for the month of June, we see that, Bailey, Felipe, and Camille, looks like there was a three-way tie for third there actually. We're at the top of the leaderboard for shout outs received. Woohoo, good for them. We celebrate that. That's super exciting. But more specifically, what we do is we'll get Bailey, Felipe, and a four-way tie for third. We'll get each person to kind of talk a little bit about a piece of recognition that they received and why that was impactful to them. And so, not only do we say, hey, great job for receiving all this recognition, but we go a little bit deeper of like, what was a particular piece of recognition that like really stood out to you, made you feel awesome, and why? And then likewise, and maybe more importantly, we do the leaderboard for recognition given. And so on the given side, we had like Alan, Arvin, and Cam all in the leaderboard for shout outs given in the month of June. And then we do the same thing. We ask each of them to do a little deep dive on some recognition that they gave. And so not only does this celebrate the people who are doing really, really well, but it actually gives extra recognition to a piece of recognition that they gave throughout the month, and kind of just does more to reiterate our values and what we want to see out of our recognition program. And so we also give monetary rewards for people on the leaderboard for both received and given. So I think it's $50 if you get the first spot, $35 if you get the second, and $25 or $20 if you get the third spot. And so this is like something that we do at our all team meetings. We review the previous month leaderboard. We also do a draw for, where do I want to be here? For the previous 2 weeks. And so we'll filter all the shout outs given for the last 2 weeks, and we'll do a draw of just like random shout outs that we had throughout those 2 weeks. And we get people to add a little bit of flavor and talk about them a little bit more. So for example, first 2 weeks of July, make a draw, and Joe shouted out Shannon for this. And what we'll do is we'll actually get Joe to describe the shout out and say, hey, this is what Shannon did. This is the context. This is why I wanted to send her some recognition. Like, way to go, Shannon. And like Noah said, like, this isn't going to work for everyone. Not everybody's going to want to be, Shannon in this situation. But what this does is, for people that do appreciate that, it gives Shannon a little bit of extra recognition, and it really congratulates Joe for taking the time out of his day to call that out. Some other things we do kind of during that all team meeting are we go through like popcorn style, and just if there's time, as someone's sharing their screen or as we're getting, the leaderboard or the draw set up, people can just kind of put up their hand and give verbal recognition. And what this does is like, if something happened recently and you hadn't had a chance to use the app yet, you can shout it out that way. And it's just a really nice way for people to like get a bit of extra context about great things that others are doing in the organization. So that would be kind of like one big forcing function. Every 2 weeks, the whole team sees that. But we also weave recognition into smaller and like more frequent things that we do at the company. So one-on-ones. Every week, Noah and I sit down, we have a one-on-one, talk a little bit about like my career growth, how things are going, challenges I'm having in my role, that kind of stuff. And in the template that we use in Lattice, every single week, there's a question of who have you recognized this week? And like, to be honest, most of the time on Tuesdays, like right before our meeting, I'm filling out my notes for our call, and I'm like, oh shoot, I haven't recognized anyone yet. Okay, I'll go do that now. But that's fine, right? Like that's what a forcing function is like, you're not always going to go to every single tab on your Chrome, but when you're reminded of something, it can really just kind of like force you to do it. And so that's what I find really, really helpful. Noah, tell us a bit about how you all kick off executive meetings, another sort of forcing function.
Yeah, for sure. And I do the same thing when I have my one-on-ones bi-weekly with our CEO of like, I'm like, oh, right, who haven't I like, or like, I'll add in my recognition and then I'll make a task for myself in our Asana being like, actually send the recognition through Guusto because these are the people I want to recognize. So it does force it. And then every week we have a leadership meeting. So the executive team gets together and we do the same thing, but we talk about it across the executive team. And so there's a prompt in there for our notes that we're supposed to fill out before the meeting of just like, again, who have you recognized this week? And so we'll each kind of fill that out and talk about it. And not only does that force the function, but it also brings light to what people are doing on other teams that I may not see. And so I'll see, oh, Michaela, our director of finance, is recognizing somebody on her team or somebody from another team for X. That's really cool. Now I get to have insight into that and why that's being recognized. Or I'll see our CEO recognize somebody on the customer support team or customer success team and get a little insight on what's happening over there. And so not only is it great as a forcing function, so people will actually give that recognition, but it provides more information to executives of what's happening across the organization and kind of helps align us a little bit more around what people are doing. And it also highlights high performers in the organization of like, oh, these are people who are being consistently recognized by the executive team week over week, month over month. These are the people that we want to make sure we're properly succession planning for, that we're properly compensating, all those things. And so it does help us in some of our organizational design as well. And so there are these little, side benefits that you don't always think about for recognition, but it's like, oh no, we all now get a bit more clarity into who our high performers are in the organization as well.
Totally. I think another thing here is like recognition, it's not maybe the hardest thing in the world, but it's also not easy. And just the things that I mentioned there, we're spending, 20 minutes every 2 weeks with the whole team. We're spending valuable executive time on recognition. And like these things, if you think of hours and dollars and all that kind of stuff, like it adds up, but it's something that at the organization we've deemed like a huge priority. And so it happens and we make sure it happens kind of at the top of meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to you, Noah.
Yeah. And I'm going to continue onto that investment piece that you just brought up, Julie, of like, yeah, there's dollars that come with that time, but especially in this remote hybrid world that we all are living in, or, in the world where like tenure is it's not very long anymore, especially for frontline industries where you have a lot of rotation. But if people feel connected to their team, if they feel connected to their managers, they are much more likely to stay a little bit longer. And so even if you get 6 more months out of somebody who's on your retail floor or in your hospital doing some extra operations work or in the manufacturing line building something for you, 6 months is a lot of money saved even if that person was only recognized 1 or 2 times. And so just having those little micro moments of recognition can boost retention, can boost collaboration, can boost that engagement. It's hard to track in a dollars and cents value, but we all know the impact those things have in our organizations. So yeah. And so we've talked a little bit about the how. We've talked a little bit about the when we do this and why it's important. We talked about the draws, the leaderboards, when we talk about it in meetings, and all those kind of fun, really important ways to kind of, as Julia said, force the function and make sure that this is part of who we are as an organization, and making sure that it's kind of just becomes almost rote. And you don't want it to become rote in the sense that people are like, I don't care about this anymore. But rote in the sense of like, oh, I need to do this because it's important, that this is something that I want to be doing every week, and I just need those little reminders. And I know a lot of our managers and executives actually just put reminders in their calendar. Like every Friday afternoon, our CEO has a reminder in his calendar that just says, give out recognition. And so he sits down and sits there and is like, all right, who are all the people that I need to recognize from this past week? And I'm going to go recognize them.
Yeah, it's nice to think that it like comes from the goodness of someone's heart in the moment, and sometimes it does, but also like, yeah, it's something you have to hold yourself accountable to, and it's more important to be in the habit, however you make that happen for yourself, than it like just happening.
Exactly. And so let's talk about accountability. Perfect segue. Thank you, Julia. And this is like any program that we put dollars and cents and times behind. We want to know the impact of it. How much are people actually using it? Is it helping the organization? And again, recognition is just one tool, one piece of the pie that is the people function, and how we reward people and how we retain people. And so it is one thing that we do. And so you do have to look at, your recognition numbers in conjunction with all your other numbers, and making sure that, if one is completely out of whack with the others, then maybe there's something there, but they're all kind of working together to create the culture that you want, and create and enforce the habits and values and behaviors you want to see in an organization as well. But so some of the things that we do to ensure accountability within our organization is we track our participation monthly. And so this is for, shout outs, participation. So how often in the past month were people giving shout outs on average? How many people in the organization participated in shout outs? So was it 50%, 60%, 80%? How many people in the organization gave one or more shout outs? So that's the peer non-monetary recognition. And then on the same side of things of the gifting, and so that's the monetary reward. So giving out the gift cards. How many people did that? How many people utilized their budget? How many people actually spent money on peers and sent gift cards to each other? And looking at those numbers and making sure that they're either staying at a nice consistent level or they're growing steadily. The way we kind of look at this is like, what is our baseline? Okay, as long as we're maintaining that baseline, that's good. And then what strategies can we use to make sure that baseline grows over the years? And so as some of the things that Julia mentioned around at the all hands meeting, at the executive meeting, during every one-on-one that managers are having, they're asking this question: who have you recognized in the past week? And making sure that that's all happening. And so we track those numbers and we kind of report back to them at the executive level of like, all right, this is where we were the past quarter. And this is, we would like to grow this by X% over the next 2 quarters of the next year. And here are some of the strategies we hope to do that. And so, again, holding the people team accountable, but also holding managers accountable. So, and the way that we do this is in performance evaluations. And so when managers are going through their performance evaluation, we pull their stats. How often did they utilize their budget? How often did they give recognition? How often were they recognized? And how often were they recognizing people within their own department, but also in other departments, and talking about those stats and saying, this is great. It grew over your last performance review. This is what we want to see, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or it's down this year. Why is it down? Why have you not been giving more recognition? Why are you utilizing your budget? How can we make sure that this doesn't happen? How do we make sure this grows? And sitting in the action plan in their performance management process of like, all right, like you dropped down 10% this year over last year. Why? Maybe they're just too busy. Maybe their team shrunk and they've just, layoffs are in the air in tech and other organizations as well, shrunk and they felt like they didn't have the time. Or maybe they're disengaged or they're not happy. And so you can kind of also find some of those other root causes through lower participation rate in recognition programs, and maybe be able to address those needs that that person has and or wants, and boost their participation back up in recognition programs. And so we do hold our managers accountable, and we talk to our clients a lot about holding managers accountable as well, and making sure that they are utilizing the resources and the tools in front of them to make sure that they are engaging their teams. And a lot of it is just education. If you use this tool and you engage your team and you recognize them, you're going to have less turnover. You're going to have more happy employees on your team, and you're going to be able to hit your objectives and your targets more easily, which usually results in your bonus at the end of the year coming back to you. And so it's really just like, here's a very simple way to make people happier on your team, to get better results, and at the end, probably get your bonus because of it. There's a couple other things that we do. And I think this is also probably a little bit more unique to us as an organization because of who we are and what we sell and what we build. But we weave recognition into our competency frameworks. And so for those of you who are familiar with what a competency framework is, it's kind of like a career growth map for people. So what are the competencies and skills I need to have at sort of an IC, individual contributor level 1? So that would be like a junior customer support representative. And what do I have to do to get to become a intermediate or senior customer support representative, or junior developer to senior developer? And so we weave recognition into a couple of our competencies, one being feedback. So why is it important to give positive recognition and positive feedback through Guusto, and how often we expect people to do it and at what levels, and utilizing budgets and all that kind of stuff in those competencies. And then we also do it in the communication process, because we think it's really important to establish trust in communication. And when people are feeling recognized and appreciated for their work, and you're also recognizing and appreciating others for their work and their contributions, the trust between those individuals grows, and it's a lot easier to communicate and give feedback to those people. So again, this is how we weave recognition into our competencies, and actually, again, not only holding our managers accountable, but everyone in the organization accountable for recognition of, like, are you actually recognizing people on a regular basis? Are you building those relationships? Are you building that trust between your peers, or your teams, or everyone else in your organization?
And I like it in our competency frameworks too, because it's not only about accountability, but it's also like almost about empowerment, where I want to move up in my career. Like a lot of people want to move up in their career, and they're really ambitious of like, how do I get to that next step? And so we sort of outline, hey, these are all the things we expect from a level 1 manager. Like, if you want to be a manager, giving recognition and feedback and having great communication is a huge part of that. And so it almost empowers people to, like, okay, this is what I need to do to kind of move up. This is what I need to do to get better. And we give them that information and arm them with like why it's important. And then, hopefully they take off and they embed that in their role with us and beyond too, right? Because like it'll serve them well long term wherever they end up.
Yeah. And once you've built these habits with folks, even if they don't have a tool, they're much more likely to do it wherever they land and what they do. And so if that means they're using it with Slack, they're using it in Microsoft Teams, or they're just going up to people because they've moved into an in-office, in-person work environment and are just saying thanks to people more often, or dropping a physical gift card for somebody, being like, hey, I really appreciate what you did. Here's, a Starbucks gift card or whatnot. I'm just going to quickly kind of show, one moment here. That's not the one I want. I'm looking for the right tab, because we all have way too many tabs.
You're doing the good share screen noises. Gonna find the screen.
Find the thing. I gotta find the thing. There it is. Here we go. Need some Jeopardy music. All right. Okay. And so this is kind of our reporting. So this is our gift reporting. This is kind of what we look at. This is for our current month. So this is the month of July. We look at sort of, how many gifts have been sent, how much is that total, how many has been claimed. And so we can see like, oh, there's still some unclaimed gifts out there. And so there's people who've been sent gifts who haven't actually claimed them yet. And then we can kind of see, what's the total there. And sometimes we can see, like, sometimes when you send a gift through Guusto, you can also put an expiration date, or you can cancel it if somebody doesn't claim it. And so that'll show up here as well. But you can kind of see, what has happened over the past 2 weeks when it comes to monetary recognition, and how much participation are we seeing, and how many people are sending those gifts. And so that is really a great thing for us. I want to bring some attention to the sort of compliance part of HR that is less fun, but there's also these taxable benefits pieces that you do have to do your due diligence on. And so this is making sure that monetary rewards are being taxed properly, because you don't want to get in trouble with the CRA, that's the Canadian Revenue Agency, or the IRS, because you don't want the tax man getting into your books at any point at any time, because it just makes life much more difficult. And we do the same thing for shout outs. We look at sort of participation rates, number of people who are giving shout outs, our average participation, average shout outs per week, per month, et cetera, et cetera. And we track this in our sort of people analytics board, along with all of our other analytics around like PTO usage, vacation usage, career development, ENPS score, all these things that we look at in conjunction with each other to see sort of how healthy our organization is. And so we're making sure, everything's kind of stable or going up. And if things are going down, then we try and figure out what the problem is and how potential solutions that we can have. And generally that means we have conversations with people. We'll look at survey results and see if there's specific feedback in there, if there's specific questions in there that we saw a dip or an increase, and also rely on our executives and managers to also, kind of tap in with their teams and see if they can give us a little bit extra information as well. So again, I do really want to talk about the fact that like recognition is not your silver bullet, but it is a very powerful tool in building culture and really reinforcing those behaviors and those values that your organization finds essential or very important for the growth of your organization. And one of our clients who uses our program, and they've got a very robust people analytics team, and they were able to show a very positive correlation of anyone who had received a Guusto gift in the past, just during their tenure, on average stayed 6 to 12 months longer at the organization. And that was just one. If they received one Guusto gift, if they found one piece of monetary recognition during their tenure at the organization, they were more likely to stay on average 6 to 12 months longer as an employee. And so that's
like almost unbelievable. And I work here, but I'm like mind blown by that still.
So that's just like, that's this one piece of information that, and this is one of our enterprise clients. They're very large, and they've got tens of thousands of employees. And so they're seeing this on a regular basis of like, oh, wow, like this is working for us. And so they are doubling down on their program of like, it is worth every dollar of their investment. And so it can work for any industry. It can work for any kind of company. It's just all about creating the program that works best for you. And this is where we talk about that crawl, walk, run model of like, where do you need to start? Where do you need to optimize? And also, what is the problem you're trying to solve for? Is there a retention issue? Is there an engagement issue? Is there a community issue? Is there a trust issue? What are you trying to fix or solve or make better? And how can recognition help you with that? I know we've only got a couple minutes left, but if anyone has any questions, I'd love to, answer them, drop them in the comments. But in the meantime, Julia, is there anything else that you wanted to share before we kind of say goodbye to folks?
Yeah, I had something come up and I could just vamp on it until, if we see any questions come up, but it was just about core values too, of like, we've talked a lot about driving behavior you want to see at the organization. And you can do that by tying in core values to your recognition. And so in our program and in lots of other programs, I'm sure, when you're sending recognition, you can attach a core value to it and say, hey, when you did this, it really, really demonstrated, the listen core value, because I felt super heard. And I felt like my feedback was really like valued by you. So thanks for listening. And that's just another way that you can kind of use recognition to drive what you want to see at your organization, by tying in those core values, because some people think core values are dead, and maybe for some organizations they are, but I think, it's something that's tied in pretty closely to our program, and we do see a lot of success there.
Right. Yeah, and it doesn't seem like we have any other questions unless I'm missing something. But yeah, again, wanted to say thank you to everyone who has joined us. I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned a little bit about how we look at recognition and how we run recognition, why we think it's important. I will give a big shout out to Julia, as she generally is the one who is running a lot of this day to day and the one that's kind of keeping the program rolling, making sure people are using it. And so thank you, Julia, for making sure our recognition program continues to move forward and does what we hope it to do. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, reach out to info@guusto.com. Also, always happy to connect on LinkedIn. I know Julia is as well. Reach out to us there. Hopefully, maybe Tyler or Connor can drop our LinkedIn links in the comment section on LinkedIn and YouTube. So don't hesitate to reach out. Ask us any questions there if you don't feel comfortable asking them here. Thanks again, everyone, and have an awesome day.